Welcome. Welcome to the Open Business Council Summit. I am Dr. Lemandre Pough. I'm the CEO of Billion Strong and the Chief Sustainability Officer for Rue Global Impact. I'm certainly excited about the conversation that we're going to have today, and I welcome you to make comments, to ask questions as we move along. I am being joined by some amazing panelists today. And the reason that we're having this discussion is because we live in a world where we're facing some pretty interesting challenges now. And the one way that, or one of the ways that we've found to address these challenges that we face is through sustainability. Sustainability, sustainability in all of our systems working together. And a part of that is corporations. A part of the way that we tackle those challenges that we face as a world is through our corporations really taking a part of that on. That's the only way that sustainability really works is when all of us work together. So today, the discussion really is about how can Tech for All, Tech for Good, and AI4Good support corporate social responsibility and corporate digital responsibility. And helping me to answer that question today is Maya Zuckerman, and she is the COO of Luman, and Richard Streitz, and he is the COO of Rue Global Impact, and Joy Tan, she is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for Huawei USA, and Darryl Adams, who is with Assistive Technology Innovation and Disability Inclusion with Intel. And so the way that we are going to structure today's session is I want this to be a real exchange of ideas, really to start to spark the conversation, to share some ideas, to talk about innovation and how we're moving this conversation along. So, what we're going to do is for the first few minutes, each panelist will have the opportunity to tell you more about the work that they do and how they support social or corporate social responsibility as well as corporate digital responsibility. And then after we finish that section with each speaker, we're then going to move into some questions where the speakers will have the opportunity to answer those questions and we'll also have the opportunity to kind of discuss those questions as well. So, again, I invite you to type your comments in the sections as well as ask your questions as well. And so, when we start to think about corporate social responsibility, I want to frame this a bit to kind of give the example because so often we hear acronyms, we hear these alphabets, and we're thinking, okay, I kind of know what that means, but let's see exactly what it means. So, in a nutshell, when we think of the term corporate social responsibility, it refers to the practices and policies undertaken by corporations that are intended to have a positive influence on the world. And corporate digital responsibility really is kind of a subset of that. It falls underneath that. And it's defined as a set of shared values or norms guiding an organization's operations with respect to the creation and operation of digital technology and that data. And so, what does that mean in terms of making the world a better place? Well, I can tell you this as a person with a disability, technology has always been a great equalizer. Um, for myself, and just a prime example, I have spinal muscular atrophy. And spinal muscular atrophy is a progressive neurological disorder. My functional limitations are that I really can't move anything from my neck down. Now, I have full feeling, but in terms of being able to type, in terms of being able to feed myself or get dressed, or any of those things, I need assistance with all of those things on a daily basis. And that also means that I can't type or write in typical fashion. So, what that means is that I use technology, such as voice dictation technology, to type documents. It also means that I use smart speaker devices to control my environment and where I live, to turn on lights, to adjust the thermostat, to turn my television on and off, to change the channels and to listen to my favorite tunes. So all of this is made possible because of technology, but it can also be barriers because of technology. When technologies are not made accessible or made inclusive of individuals with varying abilities, the truth is it can be a barrier, it can be a door that blocks people out. And remember what I said at the beginning of this discussion was that in order for sustainability to work, we must all be engaged. We must all be included. We must all be a part of it. So it is imperative that once we start to look at corporate social responsibility and that subset of corporate digital responsibility, that it is a conversation that from the beginning of it is based in inclusion, is based in a sense of we're all a part of this. We all are stakeholders. We all belong in this conversation. So as we move forward, as I said, I've got 4 wonderful panelists that's going to help facilitate this conversation. And so we're going to start with Maya. Maya, first of all, thank you for being a part of this discussion and being willing to share your insights. Tell us about the work that you do and how you address the issue of corporate responsibility as well as digital responsibility.
Thank you, Dr. Lemandre. What a powerful and amazing story, and just really glad to be here today. Yeah, for me, for my work, so I'm the COO of Luman. We work on the intersection of innovation, culture, and leadership, and really ask the question: how do leaders show up in every level of the organizations, with the idea of empowering leaders of all levels? So that is my work with Luman, but the work that really aligned with this conversation is my 2 other projects. One is with a curated project by the World Economic Forum called the Global New Mobility Coalition. And that is a project that has over 200 partners from around the world. And it's meant to look at how do we make the cities more electric, more accessible, more attainable, green, and inclusive. And we've got a lot of projects around zero emission areas, around zero emission urban fleets, and the idea of having both the sustainability part of it, the clean air and accessibility. And the other project, which is a volunteer position as a co-chair of the DEI committee of IEEE, Ethical Aligned Design, we're looking at the ethics around the deployment of artificial intelligence and autonomous systems. We are a group that's now trying to bring in the standards of DEI into the world. The most important thing for me personally is really the conversation of inclusivity, and it's the inclusivity of every person in this conversation, and not only from the place of who's interacting with the technology, but also who's designing. Who are we not speaking to? Who are we not at the bringing to the table? And if we're not bringing them to the table, how are we going to their table? How are we getting invited to their table as we are developing and designing these technologies? Because that is really vital. And the other aspect that sometimes is forgotten in all of our conversations, because we're always human-centric, is the ones that cannot speak. Animals, nature, and the conversations of the rights for nature, because if we're going to go really deep into inclusion, we forget our kin, that is a problem. That is forgetting part of ourselves. So that is a lot of my work, and I'm also pursuing an MBA in circular economies, with looking at what does a circular bioeconomy look like. And also a now, as today, fellow of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation as part of their 10-week sprint. So I'm really interested in how economies are coming into play here because of if we're not going to solve the economical side, we're not going to solve the biggest problem when the biggest polluters on the planet, the biggest issues come from our biggest corporation. So we need to actually go inside and fix all these different issues that you've actually talked to Dr. Lemandre on how to actually include everybody in this conversation. So that is me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And congratulations. That is fantastic. Congratulations. What an honor. Thank you. Richard, tell us about the work that you do and how it relates to the topic.
Well, thank you, Dr. Lemandre. It is really a pleasure to be here. I am the COO of Ru Global Impact, and we are a consulting firm that helps multinational corporations become inclusive. We help develop programs for them that allow them to change and adjust their corporate culture so that they create more inclusive environments for their employees. And so by the work that we do, we create sustainable programs that allow that process to happen in a way that it's not just a one and done, but that when we help and create and establish these programs and work closely with these corporations, that it repeats itself and allows a continuing process to encourage ongoing accessibility and inclusion. And so what's important about that is that because we deal with multinationals, this varies, of course, from country to country, and there's a social sensibility that goes along with that is different for the Middle East than maybe for in the US, for example. And so we're sensitive in working with the corporations to develop these programs. The other thing that we do from the digital standpoint in regard to accessibility is help make sure that the fundamental, like things like websites and their digital media and their documentation is accessible and inclusive for all peoples. And so that's how we sort of work in both of those worlds and try to create sustainable environments in the workforce and for corporations and for the employees, so that all peoples around the world have the same opportunities to be able to provide and pursue their dreams.
Fantastic. And I will tell you, I know that the reach of this is it goes really, really deep. And I certainly do appreciate the work that so many corporations and organizations are doing in the world. And it's just amazing to be a part of that work and helping them realize how to create really inclusive environments. So thank you, Richard.
You bet.
Oh, and I will also tell you, Richard is a man of incredible skills. And as this discussion moves forward, you will hear them, and it's almost like, wow, really? 007 in real life in the US. It's amazing. Okay. Amazing.
Thank you.
All right. So next we have Joy from Huawei. Joy, tell us about the work that you do and how it relates to social responsibility as well as digital responsibility.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Lemandre. Very honored to be here. For those who are not very familiar with the company, just a little bit about Huawei. Huawei is a leading global provider of information and communications technology infrastructure and smart devices. The company was founded in 1987 by a 42-year-old entrepreneur, Mr. Ren Zhenfei, together with several partners. They had about $3,500 in funding capital, but they had a big vision of building a fully connected world to bring the benefits of technology to everyone, everywhere. Today, Huawei connects over 3 billion people in more than 170 countries, and the company has more than 197,000 employees worldwide.
Wow.
More than half of our workforce, 105,000 people, are dedicated to R&D to develop new types of innovations and possibilities for technology to improve our everyday lives. So innovation is truly in Huawei's DNA. The business is focused on 4 key areas: consumer, carrier, enterprise, and cloud. Our consumer devices include everything from smartphones to laptops to watches and beyond. And the carrier business is focused on helping operators bring connectivity to people around the world, including rural areas that have been traditionally underserved. The enterprise business helps organizations across a wide variety of industries, such as financial services, energy, transportation, and manufacturing, undergo digital transformation. And finally, the cloud business is helping organizations of all sizes manage their business better for our always-on connected world. Advancements in connectivity have really changed virtually all aspects of our lives, from how we use our smartphones and devices in general to how things are manufactured, how we interact with the world around us. Connectivity has been a major catalyst for technology innovation and economic growth, benefiting every industry from media to manufacturing to the electric grid and education. So for consumers, connectivity has opened up a new world of possibilities. As people have been spending more time at home during this pandemic, connectivity has truly become a lifeline, enabling people to check in with their family and friends, work remotely, take advantage of telehealth services, take classes online, and much more. However, worldwide, 950 million homes still have no broadband connections, and 80% of those that are connected still need faster speed. So it is absolutely critical to bridge this digital divide so everyone has the opportunity to succeed. As connectivity has opened up new possibilities for people like us and also enterprises, it is imperative that we all remember the bigger picture in our everyday lives. So how to use technology for good, making people's lives better, and creating a more sustainable world. Huawei has a Tech4All initiative, and I can talk more later. And we're committed to making long-term nonprofit investments that are centered around digital inclusion and making sure no one gets left behind in the digital world. And these programs are aligned with UN's Sustainable Development Goals and solving a lot of issues like tackling climate change, improving health and education. Our goal is to help another 500 million people benefit from digital technology in the next 5 years. We're also working with global partners such as UN agencies, NGOs, research institutes, governments, and businesses to make this goal a reality. So that's just a quick summary of the company and our Tech4All initiatives. And I will stop here for now, and then I can talk more if there are questions.
Absolutely. I tell you, Huawei has done some amazing things, and to hear the goals of the number of people that they want to get technology to, and particularly things like broadband internet, that's amazing. And we realize the advantage. We realize how that really does open doors for people. So thank you, Joy, for that. And we certainly will talk more about that a little bit later on in the panel discussion. And pulling up the rear is Darryl from Intel. Darryl, thank you so much, man. Tell us how you all relate to corporate responsibility, as well as digital responsibility.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Lemandre, for having me, and it's just a real pleasure to be here today. So I work in the accessibility office at Intel. And specifically, I work on accessible computing innovation projects. And what that means is that I'm working across the company with Intel Research and Development and into our individual product groups to identify opportunities where we can bring either more accessible computing experiences to people, or even specific assistive technologies directly into the products that we're building. And so the goal really is to ensure that everyone on the planet can participate in, with computing, but more importantly, what you do with a computer. When we sit down at a computer, we're not computing. We sit down at the computer because we are engaging in the global digital discourse. We are engaging in the digital economy. We're consuming information, consuming entertainment. We're creating. We create on our computers, and we communicate, our ideas. And for people with disabilities that have barriers to, in any form, to that prevent them from engaging across those contexts of creation, consumption, and communication, it's a huge problem. There's so many just brilliant people out there that are just sort of on the sidelines because of a technology barrier. And so I'm highly motivated to be looking at those fundamental problems, understanding across that spectrum of disability what those barriers continue to look like today, and to understand how we at Intel can both innovate and then work with our industry partners to bring solutions to the market for at scale, importantly, that allow for folks today to enter into this ecosystem. So for me, I am today legally blind. I have a degenerative retinal condition called retinitis pigmentosa, and I'm also completely deaf in my right ear. So along my career path, along my journey in sight loss as well, I've been introducing myself to assistive technologies along the way in order to keep myself being able to contribute effectively in my job. So I've been really, I understand fundamentally where these, how barriers can be problematic and can be exclusionary. I think that what I'm now trying to do is extend beyond my lived experience with disability, and I've completed a master's degree program in assistive technology studies and human services from the Cal State University Northridge, or some may know that as CSUN, who hosts the annual Assistive Technology Conference in Anaheim. I feel with that education and my lived experience combined, as I continue to grow and continue to listen to the disability community as a whole, it's giving me the information that I need to help, continue to guide the direction of, where we're going to go in terms of resolving many of these barriers. And I think that's really the key to me is, the bottom line for me, I guess, is that everyone needs to participate, and everybody needs to feel like it needs to be able to contribute to their greatest ability. And until we do that, the job isn't done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Darryl. And I'll tell you, there have been so many innovations that have come and have been empowered by Intel. So it's great to know that a talent like you is also working in that field, and that's why we can see so much advancement. So now we come to the point of the session where we can really get into the discussion about how we move this forward. So my first question is going to go to Maya. And Maya, you talked about looking at the entire system, the donut, so to speak. And when I begin to really think about inclusion, I really start to think about human settlements. I start to think about cities and what that actually means in terms of how we move forward. So how do we design more inclusive cities? How do we do that?
I think we start with a design process, and it's the question that needs to be on everybody's mind: who's not in the design room? Who haven't we spoken to? Who's not invited to tell us, whether they're designers or people who are going to be end users, of their lived experience within a city? Right now, we've designed a lot of the cities around cars, and that's important. That's an important part of it, because we got to have mobility, but cars also create a lot of issues. They create a lot of pollution. They create a very specific way of moving around a city, and it's not human-centric. So when we come and design this and redesign our cities for the future, are we including everyone in that conversation? And everyone is people who are able and people living with disabilities. Are we including more vegetation, and are we including animals roaming through our cities? I know I live in San Francisco. We have all kinds of wonderful animals here. Are we including them? Are we including accessibility? And are we including, as I said, in the beginning, in the design process, everyone? Because one of the biggest issues that we're seeing, and we know about it from seatbelts killing women because they were made to, and they were based on a male of a certain size body, to all kinds of other accessibility issues. There's a wonderful new movie called Coded Bias on AI, and we're unleashing these really powerful technologies with actual no due diligence from the communities that are going to be using them. So are we actually doing our due diligence? And maybe we know the technology moves so fast, but due diligence needs more time. So are we building these cities while talking to people who are going to be using them? And are we thinking outside our own box and our own filters, and asking what questions am I not asking? And that's how you work with community. We're building cities, we're building communities, we're building these technologies for people to use, but we forget to talk to the people. So I think there needs to be much more of that conversation that is not one-sided. I think there is a huge change. I think movies, documentaries, and also, unfortunately, accidents wake up people to something's not working. And in a way, COVID, in its like the few blessing moments of COVID, what have been people work from home, so they realize that everybody can work from home, and maybe we should help the people who cannot get to the office work better at home. And also on the other side of our doors, our lived experiences and our lived environments have become more on the street, like with open streets and restaurants putting their parklets out there, and we all of a sudden realize that the city shouldn't be only for cars. So I think there is that transition that is happening, and with the movement to build back better, with circular economies and circular cities, with the Great Reset that the World Economic Forum has declared, of how do we actually build better communities, better environments for everybody to be included. And it takes bold decisions, but it also takes everybody to be heard. But also sometimes we got to push good policies, we got to show up. So it really is a conversation of the intersectional conversation, and for allyship to be moved to a next level, to really be championing other voices and to be allies while we're actually pulling and bringing people to the conversation, and not only working for ourselves. So I think that is part of it. It's really the work of humans. One of the things we say at Luman, the strategy firm I work with, is that this future that we're creating, we have all the tools, we have all the technologies, we have all the smart people, and we don't know how to work together, and we don't know how to bridge our divide. So that is the biggest work that I see to build better, more inclusive cities.
Bridging that divide is the work, and I agree with that. And I would also say that the concept of inclusivity has changed, that it has been broadened, because before it was much more about checking the box, making certain that the boxes were checked. Now we're really looking at the harmonization of those systems that make up those cities, that makes up those settlements. And that is a different approach. Would any other speakers like to jump in on that?
Well, I would just say that it's very, the fact that everything is human centered and very, and the critical need to be listening to stakeholders, listening to the participants, whether we're building smart cities, whether we're building new digital experiences, it's so critical. I think we do so much, we spend so much time talking at each other and not enough time listening to each other.
Right.
And the more that we can build those skills, the better off. And I do think that the fact that we've all been working from home for the last year, time will tell how this has worked out, but it feels to me at least that to some degree there's been a bit of a level playing field, because we all have the same sort of digital challenge to communicate as a group online. It's a little bit, I think that is a little bit level for people, and maybe we've learned a bit better about how to listen, and time will tell to see if that is the truth or not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree. Richard, we're coming to you. All right.
Okay.
I want to talk a little bit about smart cities. Maya just mentioned about inclusive cities, but I want to drill down a little bit more into this concept of smart cities. Now, with your background, you've actually designed, planned, built smart cities. And typically when we think of smart cities, the first thing that pops into your mind is kind of a connected city where everything talks to everything. But it's more than that. Give me a little bit more about what exactly a smart city is and what can it mean for our lives moving forward, particularly as it relates to sustainability and digital responsibility and corporate responsibility.
Well, yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Lemandre. I appreciate it. One of the interesting things about smart cities is sort of the sometimes ultra futuristic concept or idea that people have of what smart cities are. I think for most of the public, when they hear the term smart city, they're thinking of Jetson-esque, flying vehicles through tubes and connected buildings like habit trails, and of course it goes. It's not that at all, really. I think smart cities have to deal with integrated systems, and oftentimes things that people don't even really see or are aware of. And for example, in reference to the point you made, I come from the themed entertainment industry, where I've had the privilege of working as a Walt Disney Imagineer for many years, building large resorts all over the world, and resorts, themed resorts and environments like Walt Disney World and so forth are smart cities in their purest sense, sort of smart cities before smart cities were a thing. And really what goes into doing that is creating these incredibly complex systems that all are integrated and talk to each other and share data points. And it's the act of doing that, all sort of behind the scenes, that creates this very smooth operational environment for individuals to engage in and work in and play in, and be able to navigate in a safe way. And I think in an idealistic way, the dream that smart cities has, or the promise that smart cities has, is providing operational smoothness, providing safe environments for individuals that are equally accessible and provide opportunities for everybody of all abilities. And that is really, while creating a tremendous amount of efficiency and as a result cost savings as a result of this comprehensive integration of these multiple systems. And that is really sort of the more realistic view of what a smart city is. So what does that mean? We're talking transportation, and how transportation is tied to commerce and being able to move people around from workplace to workplace, getting individuals or getting systems in regard to like refuse management and garbage control, and how that's handled with wastewater, and how all of that is tied with energy and renewable energy sources, and how all of these systems can be coupled and tied together to create sort of this very sustainable, inclusive environment. That's the ultimate promise. Now, getting to that stage is difficult because, of course, cities already exist. I had the benefit of being able to create these environments from scratch with all of these complicated systems sort of built from the ground up, which is sort of the ideal way to do that. It gets far more complicated when you have an existing city with transportation systems and an electrical grid and this infrastructure in place, all these multiple levels of from government and social systems and so forth, trying to create and ties between all of these multiple systems in a way that is manageable and affordable for the city and government to try to do that is a tremendously complicated task to try to take on. And so I think understanding almost case by case, city by city, region by region, what are the highest priorities in regard to what is achievable and what can be attained by these cities to try to tackle first and work as sort of a foundational level for creating a smart, intelligent city with these systems, and sort of work from that up to be able to provide that promise. I think that's where it gets really, really challenging, and why it's so important for all of these tech companies who are providing their products and services to allow that. The advent of like 5G and the high speed communications, even the inner space, Elon Musk's system of telecom up in space. These are all ways that'll allow us to be able to transfer and deal a tremendous amount of information without necessarily having to create a tremendous amount of expensive infrastructure, laying new wires and so forth. And so anyway, so these are all the sorts of things that that I think we can look forward to.
Right. You mentioned basically the harmony of these systems, and you talked about efficiency and in communicating. And honestly, that's the basis of sustainability. That's the basis of what the whole sustainability movement is about, which leads me directly to you, Joy. So my question, particularly to you, is about, we hear a lot about the UN sustainability goals, those 17 goals that were, adopted by the UN to basically make the world a better place. How are companies like Huawei working towards achieving these 17 sustainable goals?
Yeah, definitely. The Tech4All program I mentioned earlier are aligned with UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And we're trying to solve a variety of different issues. But there are 4 areas we're focusing on to help build a fully connected and sustainable world. First is about education. Mm-hmm. Everyone, everywhere, has the right to education and the equality of opportunity it brings. One existing education initiative is the DigiTrack. It's a mobile classroom we built with our partners. It provides training for digital skills in remote regions in Kenya and has already benefited nearly 800 people. We also have a smart bus that runs in Belgium, the Netherlands, Spain, and Portugal. The smart bus has visited 126 schools in 79 cities. It offers interactive training to students and parents and teachers. So we're doing a lot of that, different educational related programs in different parts of the world. Healthcare is another big domain for us. It's a basic human right everyone should have access to. So we're committed to providing accessible medical services so that health issues can be prevented or treated. Additionally, we're also building digital platforms that connect the healthcare providers and underserved communities with these remote collaborative solutions. We also focus on working with hospitals, medical researchers, and biopharmaceutical companies to make healthcare breakthroughs using AI and other digital technologies. So, we're trying very hard to eliminate these development gaps by encouraging entrepreneurship and helping create jobs through equal access to digital resources. Mm-hmm. And lastly, protect the environment. That's a really big thing. So we work with nonprofit organizations around the world to detect illegal logging and protect endangered species. So we're aligned with UN's goals in many different fronts.
No, and that's great. I think that we talked about education, we talked about those things being connected. And I think that one of the areas when we start to think of being connected, I focus a lot on people with disabilities. And honestly, that's because it's one of the largest, the largest minority group in the world that anyone can join at any time. But it's also one of the largest marginalized groups in the world as well. And so, Darryl, I want to come to you with this question, particularly about employment. How do you see technological advances impacting the future of employability for people with disabilities, particularly since we're talking about this connective and inclusive world?
Well, I'm certainly an optimist in this space, so the spoiler alert is that it's awesome. I think that we want to look first at the history here, where not too many years ago, there was the barrier to employment for people with disabilities was significant in that because everything was physical, and if you weren't able to participate in a physical labor type of capacity, you were not working. Mm-hmm. And as we become more and more of a knowledge economy in a digitally connected world where the location of your workplace is not as relevant anymore, and so folks are able to work from home, this opens up tremendous opportunities logistically for a very large segment of the disability community that do have challenges with with just the commute to begin with. That alone is significant, and I think the changes that we've seen this last year have obviously proven that we can all be productive from home. I do think that we have an interesting maybe problem statement coming up here in the fairly near future when people start going back to the office. There's going to be certainly people that are interested in having face-to-face engagement and being in the office, and then there's going to be people that will continue to work from home. And all of a sudden, we're going to have that dynamic again, where you've got the office meeting with one or two people dialing in remote, and it's not equal again. And so technology-wise, we're going to need to figure that problem out to ensure that if I am working from my home, dialing into an office meeting, that I still get that feeling that I'm an equal part of that conversation, part of that team, part of that engagement. So that's an interesting thing to be considering. But I do think even more so, we want to continue to advance incrementally on all the different things that are happening today with computers. As we know, if you're a blind computer user, you're able to use a screen reader, and there are limitations to that, but these limitations are being improved. And the same thing goes with across for hard of hearing and deafness. We've got captions, we've got different things that are all pretty good, but there's room for improvement. So we should continue doing that. But I think we also want to really fundamentally look at what it means again to use technology to contribute. I think there's a lot of opportunity with AI in particular, in the large umbrella of AI being everything from computer vision to natural language processing to all types of specific machine learning solutions to bring together more context-aware, more kind of smart computing that allows for more conversational computing and less keyboard computing. So taking away, kind of moving away from this paradigm of keyboard, mouse, monitor, and more into engaging with your colleagues and having the computer and the compute be that smart entity in the environment that is capturing all the things that a computer does well. Let us as humans do what we do well. We want to communicate, we want to connect with each other, we want to engage, problem solve, all of that creativity, and not worry about all the logistics. Just let the computers do what they do best, and the memory, let the computer remember what you said. We've all been in those meetings where someone says something brilliant and someone says, "Oh, can you say that again?" And
right.
So those are the kind of things, I think they help everybody, but they're really going to allow for people with disabilities to just engage much more completely. I'm really looking forward to seeing a new generation of employees with disabilities coming into the workplace, and not just coming in because it feels like the right thing to do, but coming in because they are sincerely valuable contributors.
Absolutely, and this is a great time to pivot to focus more on on AI, because we've got questions about AI, and this is becoming a really big part of it. This, artificial intelligence and even augmented realities are really becoming tools that are starting to really take shape and really influence our lives and how we do things and what it means. So I'm coming back to Maya. So this one is really about creating standards for design and particularly for diversity and inclusion. So how do we create those standards of design when we think about artificial intelligence and autonomous systems? How do we do that?
So the IEEE, which is a very, very large organization, has been doing standards for all kinds of electrical signals. I mean, I always bring in the simplest thing is, the standards of how lights in a city, the red lights, green lights, or that's the standards. Like, you have to have a standard for that, and you want it to be buttoned down and boring because you don't want everybody's ideas into should we do it this way or that way, but actually an agreement that everybody actually takes that to a standard around the country, around the city. There might be a little change between countries, but more, it stays that way. So the IEEE has a project called Ethical Aligned Design, and it's welcome for anybody to join. And you can also download the full From Principles into Action book. So we don't have standards yet. And we have, I think it's about 12 different working groups to bring different segments of principles of AI and AS, so artificial intelligence and autonomous systems, into standards. And that's a process that, depending on the level of standard, takes about 2 to 4 years, because this is work of committees. They got to go through every word, and you really got to test and see that the community that we're offering the standards to is going to accept those standards. Right. So we're in the early stage of looking at the DEI, and even the question of how do you do standards around diversity, equity, and inclusion when you actually come to design AI and AS? I mean, can you even do that? I mean, our first question is, can we even do this? Because we're learning as a society. Even our language has changed in the past 10 years, the way we speak about marginalized communities, different diverse marginalized communities. Our language is ever adopting, ever changing. I mean, 10 years ago, we didn't use a lot of gender non-conforming pronouns, right? And now we do. So we need to actually create that space for the changes that are coming in our understanding. It doesn't mean that that people who are gender non-conforming were not there, but our language, our culture has adapted to actually be more inclusive, to have language that brings them into the fold, where language before was actually creating more of a divide. So I think it's a continuous conversation. I think the biggest thing always is who's not in the room for me in the design process, of anything, a design process of anything. And it's not we need to bring everybody to the room when we can't hear. It's more, how are we doing a design process that we test, that we check, that we don't assume. Even one of my CTOs once said, an assumption is a conjecture. You can't prove it. You can assume anything, but without actually asking people, you don't know their lived experience. So it really is to take care in the design process from the get-go. Because we all come in with our own biases. We're all come in with our blind spots. And only when they take a step back and ask, what do we not know? What am I not seeing? Do we actually start including others? And unfortunately, and this is the scary thing, is that a lot of these technologies are being developed just by very similar developers in rooms where they're actually not interacting. And we're seeing, and the issue, and I was just listening to the director of Coded Bias, the issue is we cannot allow for these technologies to go out there without being tested. We cannot wait for an accident to happen to then reverse engineer it. We don't do that with the FDA. We didn't go out with the vaccines without testing, and people thought it was very quick. No, the mRNA has been in tests for over 10 years, or I think over 20 years even. So I think we're just seeing kind of the last side of it, of bigger testing on human subjects was larger and yes, was faster, but that was been done for like 10 years. So I think if we don't allow drugs to go out to the market, we should not allow these AIs to go out to the market without being tested and vetted and see if there's any effects and dangers to the communities they're going to be serving. Because at the end of the day, these technologies, there's a lot of romanticism because we're birthing in something new that is our own. We are birthing these technologies, but they're just as smart as the people who develop them, and they're just as biased as the people who have developed them. So if we actually just say, hey, this is a tool to support our genius, to support humanity, support the planet, to support nature, then we actually humble those technologies to what they are. They're tools to make us work better. And if we actually look at that way, we actually are also seeing what is the harm that these technologies can bring, and who are they not supporting, and who are they putting in danger? Because if we don't have that, these conversations need to be held now, and not only conversation, they need to move into standards. And that's part of the broader work of the IEEE is that around anything electrical, but definitely with the ethical aligned design project, they're really moving into standards now.
Yeah, yeah. And that's wonderful that they are moving into standards. And so you mentioned AI again, and this is something that keeps popping up. So Richard, I want you to give me an example of bias when it relates to AI and what the possible implication is of that. Can't hear you, my man.
Oh, there we go. That was bound to happen at some point today. So artificial intelligence certainly is an interesting challenge, especially in this day and age, where more and more companies, organizations, software are relying on artificial intelligence in one way or another to generate algorithms that help streamline output. And there's what's interesting about sort of the post-COVID world that we're going to be living into is the acceleration of that process and sort of the large shift that's occurred in the mentality associated with that. And so that is one of the things that if a silver lining can be found, that I think is important of the COVID year that we went through, and from now on the post-COVID universe that we are going to survive in is I think corporations have done this shift already and their mentality. And Darryl, you brought that point up about how working from home versus working in the office, and there's a huge paradigm shift certainly as related to that, where corporations have now seriously, where before they really sort of dug their heels in about no working from home, everyone needs to work in the office, people working at home are going to slack off and not be very productive, and now they have actual tangible proof that that's absolutely not the case. And so now there major corporations all over the world are looking at the reality of people working from home, and the idea that coming back to the office may not necessarily be all that desirable, especially from a cost-saving standpoint and so forth. And plus opening up the realm to many, many more people. But anyway, I digress. To answer the question more directly for LaMondre, is, artificial intelligence, there's definitely biases that have occurred, and there's good examples of that. There's a large online retailer, which in 2015 ran across a huge problem based on an artificial intelligence system that they set up to help deal with applicants and resumes being brought in for job positions, for job placement. And this was a huge problem and a huge man-hour challenge for them in regard to sifting through these thousands and thousands of resumes for positions. So what they do is they created this algorithm via artificial intelligence to help sift through and process key applicants that would stand out from all of them. And so they created this, and it was going along, and they were working, but they started to notice a trend that the majority of the applicants that the algorithm was selecting were all male, disproportionately all male. So they realized, okay, so why is it doing this? Why? Because that wasn't one of the key points to which the algorithm was working from. So it was difficult. They had to really sort of go back and say, what's the problem here? It turns out it was the data sets that they were using. They had tooled the data set pool from resumes that had been collected from a number of years previously, from resumes that they had received for similar positions. The problem was, because this was a larger tech company, at that period of time, most of the applicants were male. And so it was garbage in, garbage out, because the data set was to begin with was heavily biased, something that they didn't necessarily take into consideration, or they didn't think that the algorithm was actually going to be making those correlations. So it wasn't necessarily that they were selecting males per se. It was the attributes associated with the data pool of resumes that was filtering through. And so they realized that and reset the entire data set pool for that. And of course, that was resolved. But that's a perfect example of how, if the data set pool, it all comes down to your data set pool. If it's not truly universal or all-inclusive to begin with, you're going to be building into it some levels of bias that need to be corrected later.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important piece of it, because even though it was not intentional, that was the outcome of it. We've got 5 more minutes left, and Joy, I want to ask you this question. There is no shortage of innovation, and that's obvious with the conversation that we're having today. But it is important to ensure that innovation has purpose. How is Huawei helping ensure that its innovations have purpose, and that is actually solving real world challenges, real world problems?
Yeah, and just very quickly, I think we always want to make sure everybody is included in the digital world. No one gets left behind. This is very important. I think that's reflected in everything we do. We invest heavily into R&D. And over the last decade, Huawei has invested over $100 billion into research and development for connectivity, for AI. And AI has become so important. Just a very quick example on how we use AI to treat COVID-19 patients. The severe COVID-19 patients, the only way to detect that is to use CT to scan their lung structure, and you can see that. And traditionally, the CT scan takes about 12 minutes, but with AI, it can do it just in 10 seconds. And then you can use a specialist to confirm the result within 2 minutes. So you're increasing the efficiency by 6 times. And there are many, many examples of using technology for good. And that's what we do, really, to make sure no one is left behind in the digital world. And we continue to innovate to help achieve that goal.
And that's fantastic. We certainly do appreciate the work that you do. 6 times more efficient. That is amazing. I'm going to pull up to my optimist on the panel. I think all of us are optimists actually on this panel, but the stated optimist is Darryl. And Darryl, I wanted to just really quickly ask you, what is your view of the importance of ethics in AI? Just really quickly, and we'll go through that.
It's critical. I think it needs to be the topic in every AI discussion. It cannot be second to the technology. I think we need to bring into the AI technology world more and more diverse people coming up through with education to be participating in developing algorithms. And we have to have full transparency on all the data sets. Like, the more transparency we have in the AI development cycle, the better off we're going to be. And we all need to learn from each other's mistakes with bias and not fear it, but correct it and realize that we're all biased and we're going to need to, just incrementally improve over time. But ethics is a major component of successful AI development.
Absolutely, and I agree 100%. I want to thank each and every single panelist for this discussion today. I hope that it was fruitful. I hope that it sparked some conversation. And as I was kind of going through the comments in the comment section, I think each of the questions that were asked were at least touched on a bit. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to really delve too deeply into this, but I believe some really great nuggets were shared. And one of the things that really stood out to me is, again, that we're all in this together. We're all in this together, and we also have to offer each other some understanding in that we're working through this, that we're a part of this, that we're a part of all of these systems integrating and working together. And in order to achieve true harmony, there must be a willingness to work together, to move fluidly through that, and to realize that we are not bound together by what makes us alike, but we're actually stronger tied together by those small threads of differences. And that is where we find our power. That is where we find our purpose. And so we certainly do appreciate you for joining this session today. And we really hope that this has empowered you, that this has inspired you, that this has caused you to think and hopefully go out there and do your part in making the world a better place. I am Dr. Lemandre Pough, thanking you once again for joining this panel discussion and each and every panelist that joined us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.